There is a woman in Nara who has not made an impulse purchase in over 11 years. Not because she doesn't enjoy things, not because money is tight. Every Sunday evening, she sits at her kitchen table with a small notebook, a pencil, and 3 envelopes. It takes her under 15 minutes. She shops only twice a week, always with a list written by hand. She has never once used a credit card, not one. And when something catches her eye in a shop window, something she didn't plan for, she does something almost nobody does anymore. She waits. She doesn't buy it. She writes it down, puts the paper away, and simply keeps walking. She is 47. Her household has saved nearly a third of its income every year for over a decade. She has never made a budgeting spreadsheet in her life. And somewhere else right now, someone is standing in a checkout line, holding something they didn't come in for, telling themselves this is the last impulse buy this month. They said the same thing last month. They have a budgeting app. They've read the books. They know exactly how much they're overspending, and still, somehow, the money disappears before the month is over. What if the difference between these two people has nothing to do with income, and nothing to do with discipline, and everything to do with a single mental process that happens in the seconds before you decide to buy something, whether you notice it or not? By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what that process is, why it's quietly working against almost every shopper in the modern world, and 5 small, nearly invisible habits used for generations in Japanese households that can begin changing it as early as tonight. Stay until number 3, because it's the habit that almost everyone assumes is about willpower, and it isn't. And number 5 ties every single habit before it into something almost no one thinks to protect, until they've already lost it. Let's begin. Before we get into the 5 habits, we need to take apart a belief almost everyone carries into every store they walk into. The belief is this: spending is a willpower problem. If you had more discipline, more self-control, you simply wouldn't buy the things you don't need. For an enormous number of people, this belief doesn't hold up, not because they lack discipline, because the model leaves out one variable entirely: decision fatigue. Every choice you make in a day, what to wear, what to eat, which email to answer first, draws from the same limited mental reserve. Researchers sometimes call this ego depletion. The more decisions you've already made by the time you reach a store, the weaker your resistance becomes to the next one. This is why the same person can walk past a display in the morning without a second glance and buy the exact same item without thinking twice by evening. Nothing about the item changed. Something about their depleted decision-making capacity did. And the modern shopping environment is built almost entirely around exploiting that exact moment of depletion. Endless choices, constant temptation, checkout lines engineered to catch you at your weakest. This is why someone can genuinely want to save money, understand their own patterns, and still watch it slip away. They're fighting a cognitive pattern with willpower alone, a tool that was never built to win that fight consistently. So what actually works? Japanese households across generations have maintained remarkably high personal savings rates compared to many other developed nations, and researchers who have studied this closely keep arriving at the same answer. It isn't income. It isn't restriction. It's a small sequence of habits that remove the depleted moment of decision entirely before it ever has the chance to happen. 5 habits. Let's go through all of them because the order they happen in matters just as much as the habits themselves. Habit number 1. The Sunday envelope ritual. Once a week, before the week even begins, sit down with the week's income or budget and physically divide it. This sounds almost too simple to matter. It isn't. Here's what's actually happening. When money is undivided, sitting as one lump sum in an account, every purchase feels like it's being weighed against an abstract, elastic total. and an abstract number is very easy for a tired brain to rationalize around. But when money is physically or mentally divided into categories in advance, groceries, transportation, small pleasures, savings, each purchase is now weighed against a small, specific, already shrinking number. That's a completely different kind of decision. This isn't just tradition. Dr. Richard Thaler, the behavioral economist whose work on what he called mental accounting helped shape modern behavioral finance, demonstrated that people treat money differently depending on which mental account they believe it belongs to, even though a dollar is a dollar no matter where it sits. In Japanese households, this practice has a name, Kakeibo, literally household finance ledger. It isn't a modern app. It's a small handwritten notebook, often passed down from mother to daughter, used since the early 1900s. The shift, before the week begins, divide the money you have into small, specific categories, even if it's just a mental note or 3 envelopes on a shelf. Not a spreadsheet, just a boundary. That's habit 1, and it changes every purchase that follows, because now every decision is being weighed against something small and specific, not something abstract and elastic. But dividing the money only sets the boundary. Habit 2 is about what happens the moment you're standing in front of something you didn't plan for. Habit number 2, the list is the law. Before leaving the house, write the list. Once inside the store, the list decides, not the aisles, not the displays, not the moment. Here's why this matters so specifically. Grocery and retail stores are physically designed, shelf height, lighting, item placement near checkout, to maximize the number of unplanned decisions you make while inside them. This isn't speculation. It's documented retail design strategy, studied extensively in consumer behavior research. A study conducted by researchers at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business found that shoppers who used a written list before entering a store made significantly fewer unplanned purchases than those who shopped from memory alone, even when both groups reported similar intentions to stick to a budget. The list isn't a suggestion. It's a pre-made decision made when you weren't standing in front of the temptation, when your mental reserves were full instead of depleted. In Japan, this habit is reinforced by something structural. Many households shop 2 to 3 times a week rather than once, in smaller trips, specifically to avoid the kind of large, overwhelming shopping session where fatigue sets in, and the list quietly gets abandoned halfway through. The shift, the list is written before you leave the house, not edited once you're inside. If it's not on the list, it waits for the next list. That's habit 2. Fewer unplanned decisions, made only when your mind was rested enough to make them well. But even a perfect list can be undone by a single tool sitting in your wallet. And that brings us to the habit almost everyone assumes is about willpower, and isn't. Habit number 3, no credit for daily life. This is the one, stay with it. Credit cards for everyday purchases, groceries, coffee, small daily items, are avoided almost entirely in many traditional Japanese households, in favor of cash or debit, where the money visibly leaves in the moment. Here's the mechanism almost nobody explains properly. Paying with a physical, visible form of money activates a measurable psychological response called the pain of paying. Dr. Drazen Prelek, a behavioral economist at MIT, and Duncan Simster, in widely cited research, found that consumers were willing to spend up to twice as much for identical items when paying by credit card compared to cash, because the abstraction of a card weakens the brain's natural resistance to spending. Notice what this means. It was never about willpower failing you at the register. It was about the payment method itself quietly turning down the volume on your own resistance before you even reached for it. This is what most people get backwards. They blame themselves for weak discipline when the actual variable was the tool in their hand, engineered, even unintentionally, to make spending feel weightless. The shift, For daily, small purchases, use cash or a debit card where the money visibly and immediately leaves. Save credit, if you use it at all, for large, planned purchases decided in advance, never for the small daily moments where fatigue does the deciding. That's habit 3. This is the one most people misjudge entirely, because we've been taught that spending problems are personal failings, when in reality, they're often the predictable result of a tool designed to obscure the moment of loss. 3 habits in, and none of them have required you to earn a single extra dollar. But the next habit is about what happens in the specific moment something unplanned catches your eye. And it might be the quietest, most powerful habit on this entire list. Habit number 4, the 1-week pause. When something unplanned catches your eye, something not on the list, something you didn't budget for, you don't say no, and you don't say yes. You write it down, and you wait 1 week. Here's what this does to the decision. Desire in the moment is almost always inflated. The emotional pull of seeing something new, something shiny, something everyone else seems to have, activates a dopamine response that has very little to do with the item's actual, lasting value to you. Dr. Baba Shiv, a professor of marketing and neuroeconomics at Stanford, has researched extensively how emotional, in-the-moment states hijack rational financial decision-making, showing that the same purchase evaluated in a calm, delayed state produces a dramatically different, often more accurate, judgment of its actual worth. 1 week later, most items on that list simply don't matter anymore. The emotional spike has faded, and what's left is a clear, calm answer. Do I actually want this, or did I just want the feeling of wanting it? In Japanese households, this delayed evaluation is built quietly into daily rhythm, less as a formal rule, more as an inherited patience, a trust that if something still matters in a week, it will still be there. The shift: the next time something unplanned catches your eye, write it down instead of buying it. Set it aside for 7 days. If you still want it after that week with a calm mind instead of a hijacked one, it's a decision. Until then, it's just a feeling. That's habit 4, and it protects every single habit before it, because even a perfect budget and a perfect list can be undone by one hijacked moment, unless something is built in to slow that moment down. But there's a 5th habit, and it's not really about money at all. It's about what money is quietly allowed to represent in your home. Habit number 5, money is never a secret kept from yourself. This is the habit that ties everything together, and it might be the one that changes how you feel about all of it. In many households, money becomes something avoided, an anxious subject glanced at only when a bill arrives or a balance runs low. Out of sight, hopefully out of mind. But here's the quiet cost of that avoidance. When you don't know your own numbers clearly, every purchase is being decided in a kind of fog. No real reference point, no honest boundary, just a vague sense of probably fine that eventually turns out to be wrong. The Kakeibo notebook from Habit 1 isn't only a budgeting tool. At the end of each month, it becomes something closer to a quiet conversation with yourself. What came in? What went out? What surprised you? Not as judgment, as simple, honest information. Researchers studying financial anxiety, including work published through the American Psychological Association's annual Stress in America survey, have consistently found that avoidance of one's own financial reality correlates strongly with increased chronic financial stress, more so than the actual size of the numbers involved. Knowing your numbers, even uncomfortable ones, reduces the fog, and a mind that isn't fogged makes calmer decisions at the register, in the aisle, in the moment something unplanned catches its eye. The shift: once a week, even for 5 minutes, look directly at what came in and what went out, not to judge it, just to know it. A number you've actually looked at has far less power over you than one you've been quietly avoiding. That's habit 5, and it brings us back to where we started, a woman with a notebook, at a kitchen table on a Sunday evening, simply looking honestly at her own week before the next one begins. 5 habits. Let's bring them together because the sequence is the entire point. Divide the money before the week begins, not after. Let the list decide inside the store, not the shelves. Keep daily spending visible, not abstracted through a card. Let anything unplanned wait 1 full week before it becomes a decision. And once a week, look honestly at your own numbers without flinching. None of this requires a higher income. None of it requires a strict, joyless budget or a single app or a single dollar spent to set it up. What it requires is something smaller and in some ways harder, removing the exhausted, hijacked moment where most spending decisions actually get made, and replacing it with a calm one made in advance. Because the money that quietly disappears every month was never really about how much you earned. It was about when, and in what mental state, the decision to spend it was made. So here's what we'd suggest, not next week, tonight. Tonight, take 5 minutes. Look at what's coming in and what's going out honestly without judgment. Write next week's list before you need it. And the next time something unplanned catches your eye, don't say yes and don't say no. Just write it down and give it 7 days. That's the only preparation needed. The woman in Nara has never once described any of this as a system, a method, or a budget. To her, it's simply how a week is lived, divided gently, looked at honestly, with a little space between wanting something and deciding to keep it. If this changed the way you think about your own spending, share it with someone who's tried every app, every spreadsheet, and still can't figure out where the money keeps going. They may be one small Sunday ritual away from finding out. This has been a look into the psychology and quiet discipline behind Japanese household finance, not a prescription, a perspective. If this helped you, subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and tell us in the comments which of these 5 habits you're starting with tonight. We'll see you in the next one.